Hey everybody, welcome back to My Wings of Refuge. So I'm about to pour a glass of kombucha. You may have heard me say before that this is one of my absolutely favorite drinks. I do not drink much of anything except water and kombucha, and I'll have a couple of cups a week maybe of a hot herbal tea, which has usually no real tea in it, but kombucha is my drink of choice. And I wanted to show you how I pour it because we're going to go through this process over the next this week and next week of making kombucha. So what is it? What is kombucha? What is everybody talking about? So kombucha is a fermented tea drink, and so I make mine. The base is mostly green tea. I use an organic green tea. It does have a little bit of black in it too, but it's a fermented drink, and you're thinking, why on earth would you drink that? Well, it's because it's a healthy drink and it's loaded with probiotics. And one of the things I like to say is I actually watch my probiotics grow. So I know a lot of times people take probiotics and there's a lot of talk about it, but I see mine grow, I know it's alive, and I feel the difference. And so there's so many health benefits. One of the things I can tell you, my husband, the very first time he drank it, and he is not a tea drinker at all, but this tastes very different than tea. But the first time he drank it, because he read so much about it, he wanted to like it. He came in from doing all of this cutting of firewood, and he was on empty, and he was just literally zonked. He grabs a glass of kombucha and he drinks some, and he sits there and he waits for a few minutes just to try to catch his breath, and then all of a sudden he's like, I'm ready to go back and do firewood. And off he went, and he continued to work and do firewood, and he had all this energy. And so the energy aspect is one of the biggest things I think I noticed, my husband noticed, and a lot of other people will notice. And I think that part may be why people often talk too about losing weight on it. It's not a weight loss thing, but yet because it's good for everything digestive. And so if you have any troubles at all with digesting certain foods, or maybe we eat foods that are just harder to digest, margarines, preservatives, a lot of additives in our foods that sometimes are just simply harder to digest, and or maybe you don't digest dairy very well, or maybe you have a digestive disorder of some sort. This might be something that will work for you, because again, it is a live probiotic drink. My husband has lost probably close to 40 pounds. He contributes a lot of that to drinking kombucha. I think again because of that the energy factor, but also just the digestive factor. It's constantly ridding your body of toxins. It's very cleansing. But it's supposed to be good for your skin. I have a friend who I read that it was good for acid reflux. I don't have acid reflux, so I couldn't really say for sure, but I had read that it was good for that. And so we got her set up. She's been drinking it, and she no longer has an issue with acid reflux. And so it has just helped with so many different things. I have read it was good for menopausal issues. I think it's good for things like that. It's supposed to be good for your skin. I think it's good for stuff like that as well. It's supposed to be good for your joints. I think it's good for that as well. It's supposed to be anti-aging. I hope it's good for that as well. I have been drinking kombucha for several years. I have been making it at home for 2.5 years. And so making it home, if you drink it, making it home is going to be way easier and way cheaper. And so let's get started with how to make it in the first fermentation. So to get started with your first batch and your first fermentation, you will need a large pot of water. If you're going to we're basically going to make tea, y'all, sweet tea. So if you're going to make 1 gallon, you would want just a hair less than that in water, and it's because you don't want to overflow your batch when you get started. So just make sure you don't feel quite that full of water. You can always top it off with water and it'll all work out in the wash. And you want 1 cup of sugar per gallon, okay? And then we're going to use some green and a little bit of black tea. We have been using the organic black tea by Newman's Own, and we are transitioning to one that's a little bit less expensive, and it's still an organic tea, and it's working out just well. It still tastes really good. So I am making 7.5 gallons because that's what we make here every 2 weeks. So my measurements will look a little bit different. I still use the same pot because my tea will just be very concentrated, and then when I pour it into my big vats, I will add more water to it then, and that works out just fine. So I'm going to turn my burner on high because we want to bring it to a boil and then let it simmer for about 10 to 15 minutes, and then I just shut it off. So while the temperature is coming up, I'm going to add my 7.5 cups of sugar. Again, you're probably going to start off making maybe a gallon, and you won't need but 1 cup of sugar. I like to put the sugar in first because it allows it to just dissolve. Again, this is just basically making sweet tea in a big pot on your stove. Okay. While this is coming up to temperature and melting our sugar, we're going to get our tea bags ready. So for those of you making 1 gallon, you would want 8 green tea bags and only 2 of your black tea. If you like yours a lot stronger, or you prefer the health benefits more of the black tea versus the green, you can add more black and less green and that sort of thing. But this is my recipe. This is what we've been using for several years, and this is what we like. So for 1 gallon, we do 8 of green tea and 2 of black, and 1 cup of sugar per gallon. Since I'm making 7.5 gallons, I will be using 60 green teas, and I'll be using 22 of the black. So I know what you're thinking. You're thinking this is probably a lot of caffeine, and maybe you're sensitive to caffeine or not looking for a caffeine drink. But there are those who are more knowledgeable than me say that the fermentation process that takes place actually cooks out the caffeine. It's beginning to simmer, and I'm going to just back the heat down just a little bit, and I'm actually going to let our tea here kind of sit and simmer for about 10 to 15 minutes, and then I'll cut the heat off, and we will let it completely cool down before we actually add in our SCOBY. Okay, so we have our sweet tea here, concentrated, that we made earlier, and now we're just ready to divide this equally among these 3 vats. If you only have 1 gallon, you'll probably have only 1 container, and that will be really easy for you. If you're making a lot, like I am, just make sure to know this is concentrated, and so you want to make sure it's divided equally among whatever you're putting it in. So here we go. Also, make sure your spouts are closed. Okay, so now all we're going to do is top it off with water. You want to make sure while it's filling, you leave enough room for the SCOBY and the new SCOBY to grow. Now it's time to add in since this is 2.5 gallons, I need 2.5 cups of our raw kombucha. This will just speed up that process and help it to go really well. This one doesn't pour real well, so I'm going to actually, there we go. I'm going to go ahead and do this now to the others. These brown pieces you see on here is yeast. Good yeast. Isn't that gorgeous? I just use these white cloth napkins. And I made these elastic bands. I just took some elastic and just sewed them together where I wanted it. If you have city water, that could be an issue because the chlorine in your city water could kill your SCOBY. Your SCOBY is what's loaded with your good bacteria and your yeast. That's what makes it the probiotic drink. So you don't want to kill your SCOBY. I'm on well water. I've never had any issues at all. Ever. Never had a batch go bad. Also, when you first buy your SCOBY, if you're buying your SCOBY online, most of the time it's going to be a disc about this big. Don't be surprised if it takes a little bit longer. If you're making a larger container size, if it takes a little bit longer for it to ferment the first time. Notice your SCOBY will grow the size of your container. And so my SCOBYs are large. So if you have a friend or know someone who's making kombucha, they will have plenty of extra SCOBYs for you. If you're watching this video, you're interested in making your own and you're local to me, just let me know. I'll be happy to get you started. If you're not, you can go on Amazon, believe it or not, and you can order a SCOBY and it'll come in the right amount of the raw kombucha for you to get started with directions as well. So that's all we really do, and we wait. This typically takes about 2 weeks because I have large, good sized SCOBYs. So usually at the 2-week mark, it's ready. Usually have my husband taste it because he hates tea tasting or the taste of tea. And so when it doesn't really taste like tea and it's not sweet, we know it's ready. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. I know it's a little bit different. Not everyone knows what kombucha is or is that interested, but let me just say one thing. The next time you are around someone who's had the stomach virus, grab you some kombucha and drink plenty of it because that bad bacteria from the stomach virus, this good bacteria will replace and you probably won't get the stomach virus. So y'all, this is a really good drink to have on hand. If you already have the stomach virus and you have this on hand, drink, 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 because this will help replace that bad bacteria in your gut with good bacteria. So if you have an upset stomach, you ate a heavy pizza or greasy food that you're not used to eating, drink kombucha. It will help settle your stomach. Feel a little nauseated? How about a glass of kombucha? You don't have to have any issues at all to drink kombucha, and you will be glad you did because you will have increased energy and you will be healthier for it. You will feel great. So grab a glass of kombucha. You'll be glad you did.